You're listening to Eating for Eden, episode 46. When it comes to doing something about climate change, your food choices matter. Thanks for tuning in to Eating for Eden, a podcast that takes a food-first approach to climate action. I'm your host, Jessica J. Schroeder, and I am passionate about food that tastes good and does good. I'll guide you with practical tips and help you thoroughly enjoy your food along the way. Thanks for tuning in to Eating for Eden. I'm thrilled to welcome another guest to the show today, Dr. Ben Lowe. Reverend Dr. Ben Lowe is the Executive Director of A Rocha USA, a faith-based environmental conservation organization and part of the worldwide A Rocha network. He holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in environmental biology from Wheaton College and a PhD in the human and religious dimensions of environmental change from the University of Florida. Originally from Singapore, Ben is an ordained minister, the author of multiple books, and was the founding national organizer of Young Evangelicals for Climate Action. Ben is currently based in the warm and watery state of Florida, USA, where he can often be found kayaking around the mangroves, which sounds like a lot of fun. Welcome to the show, Ben. I'm really glad that you joined me today.
Thank you, Jessica. It's really good to be with you all, even if it means I'm taking a break from my kayaking. It is a lot of fun.
Well said. So, Ben, would you start off by telling us more about A Rocha? You're the executive director of A Rocha USA, but it's an organization that's international in scope. What would you like the listener to know about A Rocha?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I'd say it's a network, an international network of organizations. So each of our national organizations is an independent entity, but we're all connected together. We share the same name and we share the same mission and vision statement, and we share our same set of core values. So we were started in Portugal 40 years ago, or a little bit more than that. Um, And so our name is Portuguese for the rock. And that's why we're called A Rocha. And it's pronounced differently in each country we're in. And so if you're struggling to know how to say it, don't worry, we're all wrong unless you're Portuguese or Brazilian. So we're good there. And so our mission statement is to live out God's call to care for creation and equip others to do likewise. So primarily, first and foremost, we're focused on figuring out what it means to restore a healthy relationship with the world around us, both our human neighbors, but also our non-human neighbors and all the creatures and habitats that we share this world with and also depend on for our own flourishing and nourishment, the growing of our food, and so on and so forth. And so we have conservation projects in the United States that focus on doing this work based in Florida and Texas and Tennessee, and then the developing work with partners on Oahu and Hawaii. But then it's not just the work that we do. We also are intentional, and particularly in this season, we're investing a lot more resources and capacity in coming alongside other communities and groups, whether they're churches or schools or households, in order to help others figure out what it means in their place to to restore a healthy relationship with the world around them. And that takes on so many different forms, but all of our projects around the world are united by our 5 core commitments, which all begin with C, so they're
Nice.
easy to remember. Yep. The first is Christian, so we have a shared Christian identity, and we work at anyone's welcome, people of other faiths, people of no faith, but we ourselves are motivated in this work by our Christian faith and identity. And then the second C is conservation, and that's framed very broadly and holistically to refer to how we are called to be earth keepers or stewards of the world that God has entrusted into our species' care. And then the third is community. So everything we do is community-based and focused on our local communities. It's not abstract, it's very concrete and grounded. The fourth C, or fourth commitment, is cultural diversity. So being a worldwide network of organizations, both within our country and beyond, we just have a tremendous amount of cultural, ethnic, racial, linguistic, all sorts of diversity And we really value that and see that as integral to our work. And the last C, which flows from all of the others, is collaboration. So we don't do anything on our own. We always are intentional about building partnerships and doing our work together with others. In part because that's how it gets done and that's how we can do it well with working with different people and different groups that have different areas of expertise and different different areas of wisdom that they can contribute to these challenges and opportunities that we all share together.
Well explained. I feel very I don't know, I guess humbled to be able to call myself a supporter of A Rocha, just knowing that there's such a great set of core values sustaining and
Mm.
guiding and directing your work because I don't know, I think one thing that just struck me is this idea of the community and the collaboration that it's not just, oh, we have this great idea and we're going to go out and figure out how to do it. It's the humility to say, let's come alongside people that are already here, that already know something about this place, that are already maybe doing some form of that work, and how do we better equip them or work alongside them, whatever that means to collaborate, to do this work together, because that really is how it needs to happen. You know, we are people of this planet and we have each other as neighbors. And you said even like I love that the wording of our non-human neighbors on whom we depend that we need to care for and work together to care for well.
Yeah, thanks so much for pointing that out. I'm really encouraged by that too. And we're really humbled to count you as one of our supporters and part of the work that we do here in the United States. And grateful for the work that you do through this podcast and the ways that that you're really meaningfully contributing to these really important conversations and learnings and helping us figure out how to live better. I think one of the challenges we're all navigating these days is our increasing disconnection from the world around us, including from our human neighbors, but also very much from the places and other species that we live around. And oftentimes, many of us don't even know the names, not just of our, both of our, once again, of our human neighbors, but also the
Mm,
names of the creatures that we share these places with. And when we're not in relationship, intentional, healthy relationship with one another, it's really, well, first of all, we feel that, we experience the loss of that. It's harder to feel like we belong to a place, like we know the place that we live in. And then it's harder to know how to live well and how to live justly and how to relate well with our neighbors if we don't even know our neighbors and aren't in relationship. And so I really appreciate the way that you're addressing these really global challenges from a perspective of food and eating, which is one of the most direct and regular ways that we are in contact with and mutually depend on the world
mm.
around us. So I think it's a very powerful and encouraging work that you're taking on.
Well, thank you so much. And I would definitely like to get into some food related things in just a bit. But before we do that, I am just a bit more curious for you to speak from your expertise as far as those of us that do feel maybe a bit estranged from our
Mm,
non-human neighbors. For a lot of us may live in urban areas, in even suburban areas where we hardly see wildlife, and just the idea of wild animals and flora and fauna, fungi, everything that's out there
mm.
that we may not see unless we're specifically going out of our way to go to a national park or a forest preserve or something like that. What is the importance of wild spaces and how might we, I don't know, get to know what wildness may be around us even in some of those less wild
Mm.
environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. And with more and more people living in more and more urban and developed environments, it can be challenging. I was just talking yesterday with an old friend of mine from Singapore who now lives in New York City, and he's recently gotten really interested in birds, but struggles and he visited me here in Florida these past few days, and I got to take him out to some more natural areas to see some birds. And it was really good for me too, because birds that I see all the time, cormorants and hingas, great blue herons, ibises, birds that I take for granted that we
Mm.
have here in large numbers, were revelations to him. And we just spent so much time standing and staring and paying attention and looking. And really, I thought, to be able to slow down like that amidst our very busy lives gives us the opportunity not just to well, I don't know if I have the right language for this, but not just to kind of glance at or notice things, but to really see them.
Mm.
And I felt
Hmm.
like we were doing that. And it was a really encouraging and really peaceful experience. And that said, however, even in some of our most urban and developed places, wildlife, nature finds a way to persist if we are willing to slow down and pay attention. And we are really, a lot of our cities do have green spaces and natural areas that are accessible, and we can go out and see things. It's not, it's sometimes it's harder to see as much and that sort of thing. But I'm always amazed at the resilience of nature and how it continues to persist, no matter how much we end up squeezing it out, even in cities. And I used to live in Chicago, and it was really important to me to be able to maintain a connection to nature. I'm not, even though I grew up in a global city, cities are not my vibe. I much prefer to be in more open places. And so living in Chicago, I would spend a lot of time visiting parks and the lake shore or some of our rivers. And I was always encouraged and amazed to see, and there was a lot of trash floating too, right? So you could see the stain of our species all over the
Mm.
place in
Hmm.
unhelpful ways. But then you could also see the ways that people had really been cultivating and investing to plant native plants and to plant trees. And one of the this is getting a little bit more into our work at A Rocha, USA. One of the projects that we received funding for this past year through the Hispanic Access Foundation and American Forests is to work with churches in all sorts of contexts, urban to suburban to rural, to plant trees, native trees in neighborhoods that lacked tree cover. And that has benefits, of
Mm.
course, for wildlife and nature. And trees are a huge draw and create all these microhabitats for critters to thrive in. But it's also they have huge benefits for our species too, in terms of mental health, emotional health, and well-being. In terms of shade, which reduces urban heat island effect. And so these are really win-win solutions, and I was so excited. We got over $1.5 million to work with churches on tree planting in neighborhoods that lack tree cover. And unfortunately, at the moment, of course, all these funds are being withheld by the new administration. And so all these projects are on hold. And I'm just hopeful that they will get a chance to actually look at the projects and consider the value and merit to our communities and release those funds in due course. Because I would love for us to be able to start doing that work.
Yeah, yeah, I'm hopeful for that as well. That of all the things that would be halted, that
Yeah.
what a good thing to be doing.
Yeah, it's certainly not controversial. I had hopes that, I knew the new administration was coming in with a very different direction and an eye on trying to cut things that the previous administration had put in place and that sort of thing. But I was hoping that this would be such an obvious win-win for our communities around the country, that it would not be targeted. But I think at the moment, what we're seeing from the new administration is they're not being particularly focused in their cuts. They're just doing very large scale sweeping blanket cuts at the moment.
Mm.
And so hopefully they will step back and reevaluate their strategy and start to consider things more on their specific merit instead of just cutting everything.
Hmm. And I like to for the listener that may not know all the different implications of something like the
Mm,
simple quote simple act of planting a tree. It has huge ramifications, like you said, for humans and non-humans that we are able to help draw down carbon. We're creating shade, we're
mhm,
creating habitats. I
mhm,
think those of us that just see a tree and only think about the tree that is, there in front of us and not what it makes possible,
mhm,
don't always appreciate like how important it is to preserve trees from getting cut
Mhm.
down, and then also doing the additional work of planting new trees where there aren't enough of them. And like you said, native trees that not just like, oh, this would look nice here, but what is going to work well in the habitat? What
Mhm.
is it, an area that gets a lot of water? Does it not require much water? And that's a good thing because this area doesn't get a lot of rain, etc. Um, native
Mhm.
species are such an important consideration.
They are, and when you think about some of the challenges we're facing, I mean, including climate change, biodiversity loss, and our foods, our broken food systems at such a global scale, they can be overwhelming. But it's remarkable how sometimes some of the solutions to those things can start pretty simply. And planting trees is one of the most accessible things that any of us can do if we have our own land or we're part of communities, or in our case, what we were trying to propose is lots of people, there are over 350,000 houses of worship or congregations around the country. Many of them have their own land and buildings.
Hmm.
And so, what would it look like? And many of them are very based in local communities. So, what would it look like to take advantage of that? Maybe you live in an apartment, you can't plant a tree um, on where you live, but you're part of a church and you can plant trees at your church. Or maybe you can work with your church to identify parts of your community that could benefit from more trees and where your neighbors would like more trees, and you can kind of serve your community in that way. So, huge problems that we're facing, but some of the solutions can start quite simply and accessibly. And planting trees, I think, is one of those great places where we can all be part of the solution.
What a great encouragement. Let's get into this kind of intersection that you see between faith communities and creation care, climate change, and food,
Mm.
since we talk quite a bit about food on this podcast.
Yeah. Yes. So, A Rocha, our history has been more focused on nature conservation. But of course, as the problems have grown, as we've started to understand and better appreciate the interconnected nature of all the challenges we're dealing with, our food systems and both access to food, but also access to nutritious, high quality, healthy food has certainly been rising very quickly on our radar as well. And in part, this is because in this season, we're working a lot with churches, as I've been sharing. So we realize, okay, A Rocha has a history of doing its own conservation projects in particular communities. It always comes from the bottom up. We don't parachute into a community. It's always a group of Christians in a community who see a problem they want to contribute to, and they want to do it as part of a network of other Christians through A Rocha. And so a project develops. But we realize, these projects, they're long-term commitments and they take a lot of resources, and they're not scalable on our own. Like we don't have the resources to do all the work that could be done. But what if instead of feeling the need to do this work ourselves in order for it to happen, what if we again partnered with faith communities all around the country, these 300 and so many thousand churches? What if we could start working with the ones that had interest and openness to do more in their context? And so coming alongside churches to equip and support and encourage and provide fellowship and community and solidarity for the work that they want to do in their communities has been a huge bright spot and has really helped us scale up our work in this season. And one of the big things we've heard from a lot of our church partners is an interest around growing food. And there's lots of reasons why churches want to get into this. Some of these churches are in more urban contexts where they're in what's often called food deserts, where there's not a lot of available access to fresh produce and healthy food options in their neighborhood. And so by growing food locally, they can help supplement some of that. Uh, there are churches that have thriving children's ministries or youth ministries, and they really want to help their kids reconnect with the earth and reconnect with what it takes to get food to their plates. Because right now, for a lot of folks, it's a mystery. When I when I travel and speak in a lot of contexts, sometimes I ask, where does food come from? And it's true. I often hear the
The
supermarket, oh, the
store.
grocery store. Yeah. And it's okay, but what about before that? And what does it actually take? So it's really hard
Mm,
to know how to live well and how to flourish ourselves, but also how to help our places and our communities flourish if we don't know what it takes to sustain our lives and sustain the lives of those around us.
mm,
And it's not all our fault. Like we're working against the way our system was set up. Like it's easier to go with the flow and not to know what it takes, except that we go to the supermarket, we buy food, we turn on our taps and we expect clean water to flow. We flip the switch and we expect the electricity to turn on. And it takes work to ask the questions, to understand all that it takes to make those things happen that are really foundational for the lives that we live every day. And so, even just by starting, so we have it's a church in Fort Collins, Colorado that we work with, where they have a little bit of land around that building. And so they started to plant, oh gosh, I'm blanking right now on what they call it, but basically like a food and forage garden.
mm,
So they planted all these native species around there that produce things that are edible, not just for wildlife, but also for people. Things like, where you can eat the leaves or you can eat the flowers, or they produce fruit or produce that you can glean and eat. And it's not at a very large scale, but even at the small scale they do with little planter boxes, which you can do in a city, right? You can build little planter boxes, and they have them ringing around the playground that the kids play in. And then the kids get to learn about these species and they get to pluck the leaves and nibble on them. And it's so much fun and it's so enriching for the children,
hmm
of course, for the entire congregation that starts to learn and appreciate. And then they go out into their neighborhoods, and when they're, biking along bike paths or when they go camping or whatever, they start to recognize some of these things that they've seen growing in their churchyard. And then they start to think about, okay, well, we'd love to see these things flourish more in our communities. They're valuable for us. And so then it's just a really, really easy way to start cultivating a better relationship with our places and our food systems. We have a church, Madison Church of Christ in Nashville, Tennessee, that we partner with that recently just built. So they have, for a number of years now, had a very large church garden. You could almost even maybe call it a small farm. And they have a Meals on Wheels program that brings food to people who struggle with access to food. And a lot of the produce that they grow at on their church grounds goes into their Meals on Wheels program.
mm,
And they recently built a greenhouse, a large greenhouse to continue to expand on what they're able to grow and when they're able to grow it. And we were able to participate with them and some of our other church partners in launching and commissioning that greenhouse with a community dinner laid out in the greenhouse. And it was just such a rich time of fellowship for local churches to come together and see what this church was doing and then to be inspired by what they could do on their own. So there's so many examples like this. And then of course we can I'll pause to take a breath and give you an opportunity to guide the conversation further. But we also have a lot of partners that are focused there. So there are similar nonprofit ministries, but they are focused on sustainable food and sustainable agriculture. And we've been really grateful to come alongside and be able to build rich partnerships with these groups that specialize in these areas.
yeah. Wow. I love the, what's the word I'm looking for? Like this, like the mustering of people at the
Mm,
grassroots level. You're saying this is not something that would be scalable for A Rocha USA to oversee, but you're able to come alongside people and equip them and encourage them in their work. And what a beautiful thing for churches and communities to serve their own. And by their own,
mhm,
I mean
mhm,
those that are in the church community as well as those in their immediate community. So you've got, I love that you noted the children's and youth ministry, like this opportunity to raise up the next generation or the younger, current younger generation
mhm,
to understand not just where food comes from, but like you said, what it takes to grow it Because I
Hmm.
think the downside of us moving off of farms and away from the hard labor of growing our food in the sense of a large percentage of us that used to be farmers are no longer doing that kind of work anymore. It's freeing us up to do a lot of other kinds of things, which is cool.
Hmm.
At the same
Hmm.
time, when we become so estranged from that process, we don't know what it costs and what it takes and the risks of something like climate change, floods or droughts or fires or what have you, wiping out a crop. That's a really big deal.
Hmm.
And especially when we walk into a grocery store and globalization means we can get almost anything at any time of year, even out of season, right? It makes us fail to appreciate the delicacy of the how delicately balanced the ecosystems of the world are and how important it is to sustain them in a life-giving manner so that they can sustain us and we can be sustained
Hmm.
in response and then going beyond that too then to serve our human neighbor by providing nutritious fresh delicious food to help supplement, whether that's a food desert or even just if people are in a poorer area in your community, or even just simply to bless people, right? To bless people and to invite them into
Hmm.
that. I know some places have lots where people can rent or just sign up to have a plot of land to take care of or to help
Hmm.
take care of
Hmm.
if they don't have their own spot to garden in. And that can be a really cool service to people to get their hands in the dirt and return them to their earthiness, right, as humans taken from the ground. So I just feel like that's
Absolutely.
such an encouraging movement of churches. I hope that this continues to catch on for others.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a real hunger for that relationship with one another, but also reconnecting with the world around us, what I would understand as God's creation, but what other people might refer to as the earth or the environment. But one of the opportunities that gives us by reconnecting to how our food is grown into our places is it gives us so much great opportunity for wonder and gratitude. The miracle that I mean, we can explain it through science, and as a trained scientist, I value that and invest in that. But at the same time, I can step back and go, "Oh my goodness, I put this little seed in the ground, and look what's coming from it!" Like, and I had so little to do with that. Like,
Mm,
sure, I planted it, so I played a role, but there's
hmm
so much else that's going on here beyond me. And it's just an opportunity for wonder and gratitude that really blesses me and enriches my life. And there, you're right, there are lots of examples of cities, but also not just cities, I mean, even just neighborhoods that have come together. So, for instance, some of our partner churches in Orlando, Florida, are participating in what's called fleet farming, where they open up parts of their land for local sustainable food production and growing. And then they have farmers that come in and have oversight of a broad area. But instead of, and they do a lot of the growing. And, you know, they include volunteers and the churches and the communities are part of it and all. But that way, you can actually have farmers without their own farms. You can have farmers that have plots of land scattered within a definable radius that they can get to. And so their farmlands are actually broken up into a number of plots on other people's land that they can then come and till. And then one of the Audubon Park Covenant Church in the Audubon Park neighborhood of Orlando that we work closely with, they have all sorts of things growing there throughout the year. And it's become a real convening place for that neighborhood. And they have intentionally planted fruit and edible plants and trees right alongside the right of ways and the sidewalks so that as people are walking or strolling by, walking their dogs, taking their kids out for a bike ride, whatever it is, they can actually reach out and they're there for them to reach out and pick something and nibble on it. And that's just, I love these models that are growing all around the country. There's another group of folks up in Michigan outside of Grand Rapids, north of Grand Rapids, called Plainsong Farm. And it's part of the Episcopal Church. and it's its own kind of standalone farm, but it hosts groups all the time who want to come in and learn about how to grow things and then experience a part of that, do a work day on the farm and then be able to eat and share and buy some of the produce that comes out of that. We have sorry, I can tell stories for ages because there's so much good stuff going on. We have these dear friends, the Wilhelms, out in Oahu, Hawaii, who have a kalo farm or a taro farm.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And I got to bring a group of Doctor of Ministry students from Western Theological Seminary out there earlier this year. And we got to learn about their farm. And I love they describe their mission. We're not just about growing taro, we're about growing people.
Hmm.
And they have so many times people just come and ask if they can spend a day in the taro patch. And if these are flooded taro patches, and so there's just something really fun. We ended up after learning about everything, getting to explore the fields with them. And it was just really muddy. And so we all just took off our shoes and we were tromping along in the mud. And how often do we get to do that?
It's
Uh,
way too fun.
yeah, it is. And so I just love all these examples of how Christians and other people, but I love that as a Christian, I love that Christians are starting to lean into this more intentionally and recover this aspect of
Mm,
what is a fundamental calling and mission of God's people and God's world, which is to
yes.
take care of the world and to live in right relationship with all of our neighbors and our places. And we're seeing that growing and spreading in very organic, grassroots ways that aren't top down, that aren't from the outside in, but really are bottom up from the inside out, and are really true to the people and places that are where they originate.
What a beautiful thing. And it's like tracking back, like, you talked about the idea of wonder, that you put a seed into the ground and you watch what comes from that. For anybody listening that has never grown anything from the ground, I highly encourage you to find a way to make that possible this spring and summer because I did not grow up gardening. We didn't have very much sun in our property. My parents just have a lot
Mm,
of the benefit of beautiful trees, amazing, lots of shade, but at the same time, we didn't have a lot of great spots to grow things throughout the year or throughout the summer. So I just didn't grow up with that, but my in-laws do, and so being involved with my husband's family, and we ended up spending about 7 months in my in-laws' basement several years back. So I was part of the weeding and the harvesting of things from the garden, and I just loved it so much. And so we're in a condo right now. I've tried to grow things out on my balcony, but I don't get a ton of sun. So
nice.
to be thoughtful about where you are and what kind of sunshine you get. But it's kind of like when if you've ever made bread, your first time ever making bread, it is a miraculous thing how yeast and flour and water and salt can become this thing that we all, delight in. And to put something into the earth, into the soil, to give it water and sunlight. Like you said, there's really nothing that you're doing. You're just allowing the natural processes that God has put into that thing to happen in
Mhm.
a particular way. You're allowing that to unfold and just to watch that happen and then to get to taste it is such a gift. And so
Mhm.
to see
Yeah.
these various places across the US in your own experience and these different connections that you have to watch people in their own places taking, like we don't grow taro here in Colorado, but it's it's a native thing to have in Hawaii, like right? So what would be the example of, things that you grow in your space and get developing a love and an appreciation for your geography, your locality
Mhm, mhm,
through the growing of food is such a cool
mhm.
experience.
It is. And I, like you, didn't grow up growing things. I grew up in Singapore, like very globalized, urban city. And so that's something that's come later on in life and has been one thing I've really appreciated about that is the sense of blessing, the sense of how the world around us blesses us, just as we seek to be less of a curse and more of a blessing to the world around
Hmm.
us. And I really experience that when I garden in my own small plot that I live on. That said, I should note it's easy to over romanticize
Hmm.
growing and farming. and gardening. And so maybe I should qualify it or nuance it by saying it can also be an extremely humbling and at times frustrating experience. Because, for instance, part of it is just learning the land. What
Mm.
grows well on this land? What doesn't grow well on this land? And learning how to work with the land instead of trying to impose your will or vision onto the land is a bit of a dance. So when I moved into where I was living and I started to grow things and all, I'd use a lot of Thai basil in my cooking from Southeast Asia, and it's
Yes.
Southeast Asia is so aromatic, and
Mhm.
it's something that I just love to throw into things. And it's really easy to grow. Also, I use a lot of mint. So like for more Vietnamese spring roll wraps and things like that.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, this will be easy. Basil, mint. I'll put it in, I'll get clippings, I'll plant them, they'll take care of themselves. For some reason that I have not yet been able to figure out, I cannot keep basil or mint alive in my garden plots here. And it's so frustrating because I thought this is the easiest thing to grow. Like I'm totally failing. What is going on? And they keep getting diseased no matter
Mm.
what I do. And I've experimented with different things, right? And both those things can grow well here in Florida. So there's something going on with the particular plot I'm on. And it's probably something historical, there's something in the soil, or I don't know what is going on. And again, I am not an expert, I'm an amateur, and I honestly just haven't invested the time to get the help from our extension office. The University of Florida runs all these agricultural extension offices across the state, and every state has these. They're great resources with master gardeners available to help guide you and problem solve. And I just haven't availed myself on that. So, first of all, I would encourage anybody who is struggling to know that there are great resources out there. But what I did learn through trial and error is that hot peppers grow really well on my land.
Nice.
And so, that's part of the learning experience, like, getting to know your land and what really thrives, and then kind of meeting the land where it's at and trying to help it
Hmm.
be healthier, but also um, yeah, just realizing that we are one piece on this land and we have a lot of agency, but we don't have all the agency. The land has some say in it as well. And partly it's based on what we've done to it, how we've treated it in the past. And so sometimes it's a long-term effort of restoring the land so it can grow things well again. And bit by bit, I've been one of the first things I did, and one of the things I love about being on a small plot of land is I can compost myself. And so that diverts a lot of waste from the landfill.
Yeah.
And then I compost in the yard. And then being in Florida, the compost does process pretty quickly. And so then I spread the compost out onto the garden. And bit by bit, I'm trying to, renew the health of the soil here that we have that's been degraded over neglect over many years. So, it's a relationship. It's got ups and
Yeah.
downs, but at the same time, I am so grateful for it, and it's totally worth investing in.
What a great reminder too. Like you said, it's not, don't overly romanticize it. There is a lot of hard work involved, trial and error, and just this reminder of we're not just these, all-powerful beings on high saying, "Okay, land, do what I want you to do." It's a give and take. It's a relationship, just like any other.
Mhm.
And when you were saying that, I thought of one of my favorite vintners and winemakers out
Mm.
in Oregon. She purchased years back this old plot of land that was a Christmas tree farm. And so the fact that it was a total monocrop, it was burned with chemicals times
Mm,
whatever,
mhm.
right? So people thought this is useless. Like you're not going to be able to grow anything on that. With love and tender care over years, she was able to produce some of the most delicious wines I've ever had
Wow.
and just rewilding the land, no-till, cover crops, all these different
Yeah, yeah.
things that she is a lover of the land. And so to bring
Mm,
oneself in that loving manner, and I think it's cool. I reached out to her too. She would not identify as a person of faith, but just
mm.
her actions just looked or which spoke to me as a Christian, like that's what the Christian should be doing, is taking care of the land in such a beautiful way. We had I had Dr. Sandra Richter on the
Mm,
show a
yeah,
few months back, and just it's just wonderful to have that rich theological rootedness for our understanding of stewardship and what that can look like in our lives on a day-to-day basis. Ben, do you have any suggestions for how people can get started on something like this in their own community? What kind of
sure.
advice would you give them?
Yeah. Well, I'd say, consider us at A Rocha USA. If there's any way we can be helpful for your congregation or your community, or you want to be connected in with other people seeking to be on this journey together and learn and grow together, please, don't hesitate to be in touch or sign up to receive our monthly updates and things like that. Um, that said, there are lots of other great resources out there. And maybe I would, before I jump into some of them, I would just add one other thought, which is that one of the things that I've come to really appreciate as I've tried to grow my own food and restore the land that I'm responsible for and have a good relationship with the land was also intentionally, and I've learned this from others. None of this is new to me, right? But I've intentionally started to try to provide food for more than myself. So whether that's sharing food with my neighbors in the neighborhood. So some people can grow basil apparently in the neighborhood. So it is really me, not the neighborhood. And so, but I can grow all the hot peppers anyone might want. And so it's been really fun to start to exchange produce with our neighbors, but then also leaving some things that are for the non-human neighbors that I share this, or other than human neighbors, I share this neighborhood with. So I have put up a bird feeder. I have instead of collecting my yard waste and putting it to the curb to be taken away, I've created a big pile of branches and leaves and clippings and things that has become habitat for a lot of other creatures in a corner of the yard. So it's kind of out of the way. But I've really enjoyed seeing the things that have been using that as habitat. And I like all sorts of critters. So I know some people might think about that and go, oh, I don't want critters that close to my home. But anyway, so thinking about food for other people and creatures as well. So okay, back to your question though. I think we've got some great partners who offer resources and trainings at pretty much every level that someone might want to engage in. So there will be lots of local places. And local is helpful, right? Because it's more specific to your context, the advice that they can provide. And so availing oneself of the extension offices that are in your area, on the master gardener networks that are in your area. But then we also partner with groups like Echo, which is a Christian organization that is all around the world and focuses on sustainable agriculture in very diverse contexts. So in the United States, they have a regional impact center with a really cool demonstration farm based in Fort Myers, Florida. So anyone in that area or passing through can do a tour of the farm, can learn about everything, all the creative things they're doing. And Echo also runs a seed bank and they send seeds all around the world and lots of technical notes and other resources to help people. They, in particular, come alongside a lot of Christian ministries and organizations working in different contexts around the world where agriculture is more of a livelihood, and they help with sustainable agricultural practices there. There's also a group called Equipping Farmers International, and they offer trainings across the United States at different times of the year. Part of the training is online, and then part of the training is like a weekend intensive at a farm site where you can actually practice some of the things you've been learning around conservation agriculture or regenerative agriculture. And again, I would there's another partner that works with Equipping Farmers International called the Empower School, and they have a site in Florida, north of Orlando, and they also have a really exciting site that's developing in Knoxville, Tennessee, that we're becoming more involved in. And that's great for students or young professionals who are looking for more training and mentoring, who want to do an internship or go through a program with them So again, all of these groups are terrific, and they offer a whole range of resources and programming that you can fit into depending on what you're looking for and how much time you can spare. But then I would encourage folks to look in their local areas and see who's there. And even if, especially if you live in a city, there is a lot of good stuff in cities that exist, especially these days. And so. Um, One that I'm thinking at the top of my head that we are starting to work more with is called Four Roots Farm in smack in downtown Orlando. And they have a beautiful beautiful plot of land that they've been able to acquire, and they're working on a huge diverse range of community outward focused kind of agriculture, gardening trainings. They're starting a culinary health institute that connects growing food with what's healthy and how to
Awesome.
prepare it in healthy, delicious ways, like you talk a lot about. And so that's a really great organization right in downtown Orlando. But those things exist everywhere. And I'm blanking on, there's another one I might remember the name of it before we're done, but just, Google is our friend on that front.
Yeah.
One of the things I learned in my PhD, I would go to my committee chair or my advisor for advice on questions when I got stuck. And the first thing she would always ask me is, well, have you Googled it? And I was like, oh gosh. So, there's so much that we can discover in our backyards.
It's true. And I will link to these things in the show notes for anyone listening who wants to check those things out. Ben, is there anything else that you'd like listeners to know that you didn't get a chance to share yet?
Hmm. Well, we covered a lot of ground.
Mm,
Maybe one thing I could end on is just I know sometimes we live very, by and large, demanding, overwhelming lives, and there's lots of juggling. And these challenges, while we might feel them deeply, they can often be overwhelming. And the scale of them and the complexity can be overwhelming. And so sometimes it's a struggle to know what we can do and how we can actually be part of solutions with the very limited constraints that we work within. That's where I'd love to encourage anyone listening to know that yes, we do need large, broad, systemic changes and things like that. But that's not all we need. And that's not all that will make a difference, both for us and our communities. And sometimes, I think you have a great saying that you often end your episodes with, but I'm going to butcher it. But it's along the lines of, start where you're at and go from there, right? So
hmm
start where we're at and figure out what we can do to take the next step forward and go from there. And a metaphor that I found really deeply encouraging in this season is of refugia. So refugia is a fancy word for refuge, and it's an ecological concept. It comes out of glacial geology and then kind of volcanic geology, where you have periods where glaciers will form over a landscape and wipe out all the forests and habitat that used to exist there would just be buried in a thick layer of ice, and it'd be really inhospitable to life, or at least most life forms that used to live there. But then at some point, the glacier recedes, and then life starts to spring back up, and the forests regenerate. And ecologists have been asking, where did this come from? How could this regenerate quicker than we thought possible? And it's the same with volcanoes. So in our work in Hawaii, there's a native Hawaiian word for refugia. It's kipuka. And kipuka are little pockets where when lava flows across a landscape, it encounters resistance. Maybe it's a slight hill or bump or whatever it is, a large boulder. And so the lava flows around instead of over. And what remains is a little pocket where life sustains and is able to persist. And then once things settle down, which they do eventually, then those little kipuka, those little refugia are places that life can regenerate from and spread back out from. And so that's how I try to think of my backyard. It's how to try to think of the churches that we work with and the neighbors and the other backyards of the people in our community and in our spaces. What can we do in the spaces that we have agency over to cultivate, to nourish refugia or kipuka? where life can persist and flourish our lives, but the lives of our human and non-human neighbors. And then what can we do to help that life then spread back out? Refugia are very vulnerable. There's small pockets. They fail all the time. But what we learn in ecology is the refugia that are most successful are the ones that are most heavily connected with other refugia or other kipuka in their area. And so, what would it look like for us to cultivate refugia in our backyard, but then to have that connected with the local church down the road and the refugia they're creating on their land, or our other neighbors? Doug Tallamy he's a professor who's written some really good books, and he has a term titled homegrown national parks. So what can it look like to develop a little homegrown national park in our own
Hmm.
backyard? And if enough of us do it, then they can all be connected to one another. And that encourages the flourishing of life. Even at our very local small scales, we can actually make very meaningful differences for our communities.
What a good word. Good encouragement that our our actions are meaningful. They do matter, but we want to do them together and not alone.
Mm,
Well said.
amen.
Ben, where would you like to direct listeners if they're interested in hearing more about your work with A Rocha or your work personally?
Oh,
Any
yeah,
pl-
thanks. Well, to get connected with A Rocha, just visit us at aracha.us. That takes you to A Rocha USA. There are many A Rochas, right? So you want to get to the right one if you're based in the US. If you're listening in from Canada, A Rocha Canada exists, and they're a great partner to us, and you'd connect with them, and so on and so forth. Um, yeah, that would be, I think, a great place to start, and then you can see what we offer and go from there.
Sounds good. I do have a fun question that I usually like to end my guest conversations with. Um, if you so feel led to answer it, what is a favorite food or a flavor combination that you've really been enjoying lately?
Oh gosh, I love food. This is gonna be super hard to narrow down and pick. Um, oh
Well,
gosh,
you're in
yeah,
good company.
yeah, I know, right? So okay, so there are so many answers to this, but one answer that again, this just shows like how simple and silly some things can be. Like how I'm just basically, although this is my career and my vocational path, I feel like I'm just still starting on many of these journeys. Is broccoli cooked well. I
Mm.
used to just experience broccoli boiled or at
Oh
best
no.
steamed.
Oh
And I'm
no.
like, okay, well, this is good for me, so I'm gonna eat it, but I'm gonna move like this is like my discipline, and I'm gonna move on to what I really enjoy. And then so we both studied at Wheaton College at different times, and now
Uh-huh.
I have the great joy of being able to teach at Wheaton College during the summer. I teach some class in environmental sustainability for them on the side, and it's based out of the field station. And the cook at the field station, Maureen Keel, she made broccoli for us one dinner where it was roasted in the oven, and it was transformative. So now I eat broccoli every week, and I always roast it, and it's so simple and it's so good. And I could go on and on about Brussels sprouts and how I've learned that how you prepare them makes a huge difference, and they can be amazing. So there you go.
Yeah, you take those
Broccoli.
things that tend to be bitter, right? And you just find the right cooking process that
Mhm.
concentrates the sugars, that tames the bitterness, and all of a sudden, something that you just ate as a discipline becomes a delight.
It's a glorious thing. Yep. Never
Fantastic.
thought I'd be bragging about the beauties and the gifts of broccoli.
Fantastic. Well, Ben, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you again for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, and thanks for what you do.
If you have questions or want to suggest a topic for a future episode, I'd love to hear from you. Send an email to edenandme@substack.com. Also, if you've been enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving a review. I'd love to grow the reach of this podcast in 2025, and I need your help to do so. So thank you in advance. If you want recipes, head over to edenandme.com where you can find a variety of delicious recipes to bring what you're learning into the kitchen. Finally, become an email subscriber on Substack to have new podcast episodes delivered right to your inbox. If you appreciate the work I'm doing and want to support the show, you'll also have the option of becoming a paid subscriber. That's all for now, friends. Until next time, be well. Thanks for listening to Eating for Eden. If you found this episode informative or inspiring, please consider sharing it with a friend. Climate change is an issue we all need to tackle together, so let's invite others to journey along with us as we continue the conversation and start taking action. Until next week, friends, take care.